with Streamr, and this talk is about setting up Ethereum workflows with the Streamr canvas, which is sort of like a GUI for stream plumbing, I'd say. It's useful for automating your Ethereum jobs and also for interacting with Ethereum contracts and sort of managing automated stream plumbing. So Streamr is started as a marketplace to buy and sell data streams. And now we've shifted focus to Ethereum a few years ago, and so all the buying and selling of data streams is handled by Ethereum contracts, and we also have a system for people to pool their data together. For example, to sell your location data, it's called data unions, and be paid in an off-channel payment system. But it's also a peer-to-peer network for this stream distribution, so people can be incentivized to be a node in this network by being paid in Datacoin, and so that ensures reliable stream distribution. And it's also this sort of GUI toolkit called the Streamr Canvas, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So the GUI toolkit has all these different modules for stream plumbing. And so, for example, we have Internet of Things sensors, databases, and also these modules for interacting with the Ethereum blockchain. And I'm going to be talking about these modules for interacting specifically with the Ethereum blockchain. But there are many different widgets you can plug in, so you can actually use, you can pump your data in through REST, through REST endpoints, and also sensors, all different kinds of things. And all of our software is open source, so everything that I'm describing right now you can download and run locally, and that's an important point that I'll get to later. So, the Streamr Canvas GUI is sort of like a programmatic toolkit. I'll give you a little preview of what it looks like. So you have these. On the left of the screen, you have a sort of menu of different widgets you can choose, of modules you can choose. And in this particular example, there's a stream, which is a Streamr stream. So these can be used as sources and sinks. In this case, as the data gets pumped into the Streamr stream, it goes into this visualization, this graph over here, and also this table. And so the canvas, you edit it in your web browser, but then it lives on a server, and then everything executes on this on our servers and not in your web browser. So you set up the plumbing in your web browser, press start, and then everything's sort of event-driven. So within this sort of plumbing analogy, there's this idea of driving input, where the output from a previous module will trigger an action in a downstream module. And I'll get more into that later because there's some subtleties about that. And then, as I said, a wide variety of modules for HTTP and database connectors, and also Ethereum modules. And everything is event-driven and goes real time, so it can be used also like a cron. It can be used to process streams data as it comes in, and it can also be used to kind of schedule jobs with a clock module that I'll get into later. So specifically for Ethereum transactions, we have these 4 Ethereum modules. And we have Solidity compile deploy, so you can just copy and paste the Solidity code, press compile, and it'll deploy it on the network of your choice, and that will output a contract object, and the contract object is then fed into the Ethereum call module and the get events module. So the Ethereum call module, as the name implies, can be used to launch Ethereum transactions, either view methods or real transactions, and the get events module streams events in real time from your contract. So you can make listeners for particular events, and we also decode your event data, which I'll get into a little more later. And then there's also this 4th module called get contract at. So if you're not deploying a new contract and there's an existing contract, you can use this get contract at module to interact with that existing contract. And one cool thing about that is that it actually fetches the ABI from Etherscan. So you can paste your own ABI, but if the ABI is already registered in Etherscan, it will just fetch it for you and auto-populate, and that'll be included in the output, which is this contract object. So an example of a canvas where we're using these Ethereum modules is up here. And so in this case, I'm doing a simple it's sort of like a stock ticker oracle. So there's a guy who publishes data, and then there's a listener, and this is the publisher of the data. So in this case, the Solidity compile deploy has some code for a publisher. I'll show you the code in a minute. But when you have published your contract, the contract object becomes visible, and that becomes the input to the Ethereum call module. And then the contract object contains the network address and ABI of this contract. And then once you've selected your function, so it's actually kind of hard to see. Can you see it on the screen? It looks very light, but you select your Ethereum account and your function. There's a drop-down over there, and once you've selected your function, then all this stuff is actually auto-populated, so that makes it very easy to interact with. So in this case, it looks very light on that screen, but I'll show you the code, and there's a function that's selected called update price. And then these are inputs to the function. So as soon as you selected your function, the function inputs go on the left, and then the things on the right are all the events that you've defined in your contract. So in this case, there's a stock ticker, there's a timestamp, and there's a price. And in this case, I'm using the button as a driving input. So each time I would hit the button in the canvas, it would publish a new stock price. But you can also feed your canvas via REST calls, for example. You can make your own Streamr stream and make that be the input for your contract too. So each module has options in the top right. So for the get contract at and solidity compile deploy modules, you select the network, and the network is passed down to downstream modules in the contract object. And also you can select parameters that are relevant to the module. So for example, for solidity compile deploy, you'll have a gas limit for your deploy. And you also select there's a drop down in the module itself to select the account that you want. And you register your accounts with the Streamr GUI. So if you want to execute transactions and deploy contracts, things like that, you have to actually give Streamr your private key. But you can also run Streamr locally via a Docker image, and I'll talk about that more later. And if you do that, then of course you don't have to share your private key with Streamr. But the way you would give your private key to Streamr would be in this config option. You just copy and paste your private key in there, and then it's saved along with your other options. So. So going back to this sort of demo over here, I'll show you the code. So when you click on Edit Code, so in the Solidity Compile Deploy module, the one on the top left, you click Edit Code, and this is the code that we have over here. So there's an owner, and the owner is the only person who can publish data. So there's this the only transaction you can execute really is the update price module, the update price function that only the owner can execute, and that will trigger the emission of a price updated event. And if you notice that once you've deployed your code, all these names are actually populated, so the inputs on the left, and price updated symbol, price updated timestamp, all these are populated just from the source code you've defined over here. So that the names come from the parameters to update price function, and also the price updated event parameters. So here's what it looks like when you've actually made function calls. So in this case, the button would be triggering the transactions, and when you press the button, you can go on Etherscan. You'll see the transactions are triggered, and then it decodes the output over here. So these are the events that were triggered each time the price was updated. You get these decoded events over here. And one thing about events is that if you have a parameter that's indexed, and it's a variable length parameter like a string, only the hash is saved there. So the actual string itself would not be present. So in the case of like price updated symbol, I'm actually pushing it twice. Once as an indexed event parameter, and once as a non-indexed event parameter. Because if I looked at the index parameter, I would only have the hash of this and not the actual string contents. But this is what the output of the Ethereum call module looks like, and this is a table output that just displays what you've displays the data. So and then in addition to the publisher, we can listen to events. So as I said, the plumbing works on our server. You set it up in this GUI, and you press start, and you can close your web browser and go away. And then each time events are triggered, you can it will process them in real time. So in this case, of course, to receive events, you don't need a private key, and the data is decoded. And here's what the get events module looks like. So I have get contract at. Oh, well, this doesn't look like my screen, but it's very faint. But on the address over there, you would copy and paste your address, and either the ABI would be fetched from EtherScan, or you can supply it yourself. The output of that contract goes to get events over here, and then this just gets pumped into this table over here. So each time an event happens, in this case, I would create the event in another canvas, and this canvas would automatically pipe the event data into this table. And so in addition to that, you can do all kinds of other processing with the data. So you might take some sort of automated action if you wanted to, for example, in this sort of contrived toy example, it's a stock ticker, you might take an action like if the moving average of the stock price drops below a certain level, trigger some sort of buy event. And that's what I illustrated in the next slide. So rather than just dumping the output to a table, you can use this moving average function. I'm sorry about I guess you can kind of see it. Yeah, you can see the data over here. But in this case, the output goes to a moving average. There are actually connectors between these. It's not being shown on this. I see it on my screen, but not on here. It's kind of faint, but there are connectors between these different modules, between all the different inputs and outputs. And so the output from the get events module goes to a moving average, and in this case, it's filtering to see if the stock ticker is STRMR, the fictitious Streamr stock ticker, and then it's seeing if the moving average is less than some certain amount, and then if it is, then it would execute this Ethereum transaction automatically. So in this case, the listener would be taking some sort of automated action, yeah. So So the Streamr canvas was initially created for the purpose of sort of making a GUI for stream creation, but you can also use your streams as inputs and outputs for your own personal uses. So, for example, if you wanted to push your data via REST API, you could create a stream, and then you could use the stream as an input to your function, to your Ethereum modules, and then you would just do a curl command, and then that would be sent to whatever Ethereum modules you are, and then that would trigger whatever automation you have there. So the streams, you can always buy and sell streams on this marketplace. You can package your streams for selling and get paid in Datacoin, but the streams are also useful as a sort of in an input and output entry points for your own canvases. And the canvases need not be for stream creation on the Streamr marketplace. You might use them for your own purposes, for example, for processing event data from some sort of Ethereum contract. So it's sort of a general all-purpose canvas for event-based stream plumbing. And then one other thing about driving inputs. So on with the connectors, when you hover over a connector, there's a little button that says DI, driving input. And that determines whether the output would trigger the downstream module or not. So for example, in this example, I have the clock module connected to generate a timestamp. So in this case, I'm using the clock module not as a driving input, but just to get the current time. But you can also use the clock module sort of like a cron. If I hover over the timestamp connector and I connect driving input on, then each time the clock ticks, which would, in this case is like every 5 seconds. The rate says 5 seconds, but it's too faint to see here. But this thing ticks every 5 seconds. If you had that as a driving input, then in that case, the module would be triggered every 5 seconds. So you can use it to set up jobs much like a cron. And then, yeah, and then finally, you can run the entire Streamr platform in Docker. This is the address. It's githubstreamr.com, Streamr Docker dev, and there's a Docker compose file that launches all the Streamr components. So if you don't want to give your private key to Streamr, understandably, you can run it locally and then use this whole canvas to automate your own jobs. The only maybe downside or thing you lose with that is that you can't buy and sell. You can't sell your stream then in the Streamr marketplace. So if you want to make streams that are being sold in the Streamr marketplace, you need to go to streamr.network. But otherwise, all the other functionality and all the automation works just in Docker. So. And that's all I prepared for today. So this is my contact info, Jonathan Wolff at Streamr. And I have 5 minutes left for Q&A if people have questions. I'm sorry the display didn't show all the connectors properly. It seemed very faint, but it's different when I have it on my laptop. I could actually open my web browser and maybe show you a live streamer canvas if you're interested. Are there any questions? No deafening silence. Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. Yep.
Thank you.